Good morning and welcome to the Liverpool Daily News. I'm James Martin. I'm joined by Ben Bocsak, fellow writer at liverpool.com, and we're here to bring you all of the latest updates on the goings on in the world of Liverpool, whether that's transfers, whether that's stuff going on the pitch. Of course, there's not been too much going on the pitch recently, but Liverpool are back tomorrow, Ben. Before we dive into some of the other things that have been going on, just talk to me about Ajax. How are you feeling?
Um, I don't know. I was confident before Napoli, and I was kind of expecting a draw. So that I think that was quite optimistic, given that Napoli are a tough team. They've been in good form. With Ajax, it's a tough one. I think they have players who can hurt Liverpool, but I'm hoping we're going to see a sort of reaction, just like after the Manchester United game. You know, Liverpool came out against Bournemouth and absolutely annihilated them, and I'm hoping that's the reaction we get. So I'm trying to be optimistic, and I'm hoping that's what we'll see on the pitch.
Yeah, it's all about the reaction, isn't it? It's a sort of defeat which Liverpool need to bounce back from, and if they don't, that's when things start to get. I was going to say start to get worrying, start to get even more worrying anyway. But good morning to everyone in the chat. Thank you for getting involved. We'd love to hear from you as always. Let us know how you think the Ajax game is going to go, and also anything else you want to hear us discuss, etc. So the first topic we've sort of planned for you for the discussion is Ibrahim Sangare. You'll have heard about him during the transfer market. We talked about him then as well, but he's back on the transfer menu, if you like. Clubs already plotting January moves, or at least the papers are already claiming that clubs are plotting January moves. The truth will be revealed in due course. But yeah, the reports state that Liverpool are one of the clubs being linked with a transfer move for PSV midfielder Ibrahim Sangare. Um, Ben, defensive midfielder in the kind of Fabinho mould. We talked about it over the summer. It seems odd that Liverpool wouldn't have addressed it in the summer if they felt like that was a big squad need. But do you think this one would make sense as early as January?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how Sangare is still playing in the Dutch First Division. His name has been around for a while, even when he was in France. It's kind of a surprise that no big team has moved for him, because he has been impressive. Maybe struggled a little bit towards last season, but again this season I think he's in form, and he is a talented player. He reads the game very well, like you said, very much in the Fabinho mold, and I think he would suit Liverpool, and I think he would be a good fit. I think the only question mark around him is why haven't any big teams moved for him yet. There must be something there. I don't necessarily know what it is, because I think on the pitch, when I have seen him, is quite good, but I have heard he can be inconsistent at times. And of course, the other question mark is how much will it cost Liverpool, because we are talking about a backup player here. Liverpool won't necessarily want to spend big bucks on him. So it just depends on whether PSV are willing to let him go for a relatively decent price, which they might not be, considering he is probably one of their most prized assets. And if you saw, for example, Cody Gakpo, who has been linked with a few moves to the Premier League, even they decided to keep hold of him because they weren't really happy with some of the transfer offers that they got for him. And it looks like, nowadays these sort of clubs do have a lot of financial power as well, and they don't necessarily have to sell.
I suppose in that sense, Rangers might have done Liverpool a bit of a favour by making sure PSV didn't make it to the Champions League proper. Of course, Liverpool ended up with Rangers in their group, but that I suppose might have changed the equation. Maybe that will bring a January move onto the table. But as someone said in the chat here, we had 3 months to do something, we blew it. So it does seem an odd one that it's only just coming around now. But I suppose to address your point about him only being a backup, you would look at maybe the age profiles and say, well, he would initially be a backup. Someone like Fabinho, he's not the oldest in the squad. It's not like your Thiagos, your Hendersons who have broken that 30 barrier, but he has played a lot of games already in his career. He's not getting any younger. So maybe that is a position where someone would come in initially as a backup, but with a fairly clear pathway to regular minutes later on.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's going to be the agenda for Julian Ward and his recruitment staff in the next few years to find a proper replacement for Fabinho, because I think it's harsh to criticize him based on this season. He hasn't really been offered a lot of protection in midfield. He's been left on his own almost in the middle at Liverpool. But sooner or later, he will start to decline, and you can't expect him to be the world class holding midfielder that he has been forever. And I think I'm not quite sure if Sangare is the right fit, because he hasn't really been that consistent, and that's going to be a concern for me in terms of the age profile. Yeah, he is kind of about to hit his prime, so that would kind of make sense. But yeah, I'm just a bit concerned about Sangare's inconsistencies.
Well, Kumar's put up another option for us, morning. Good to hear from you as ever. He says either we are going to sign Douglas Luiz or Ibrahim Sangare. We can't sign both. That seems quite likely. It's hard to imagine Liverpool going for both. As Kumar points out later on, Luiz would be the bargain buy with his contract situation. He's out of contract next summer, so the possibility of even going for him on a free transfer. But is this a sense of you get what you pay for, Ben, or would Luiz be the kind of shrewder buy for you?
I think it would be a shrewder buy, but personally, I think it kind of feels harsh to say, but I think Liverpool are better than Luiz or Sangare. I think they can set their sights higher, and I think they can aim higher. And when someone like Claudio Kone is potentially available at Borussia Mönchengladbach, I'd probably put my bet on him rather than a Luiz or a Sangare type.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Got some comments here saying even Fabinho, as fabulous as he is, he still needs to be pushed. That seems true enough. It's true across the pitch, isn't it? There seems to be a kind of, it's so hard to diagnose exactly what the problems are. It's quite systemic. You pointed out rightly with Fabinho, he hasn't been protected properly. And a lot of the things which sort of at first glance look like attitude are more kind of tactical, more systemic. But equally, it's hard to deny that, these players do need to be pushed. They have to have their position constantly under threat. They need to know that if they're not performing, there's someone else just as talented who can come in and take their place. So yeah, maybe that's one of the positions in the squad where that's lacking. But it's basically you can pick any member of the Liverpool squad this season and they'll have come in for some sort of criticism. Another one is Virgil van Dijk, so we'll move on to him now. Again, you can make the case that the system is letting him down big time. The defence have been subjected to a lot of 1v1 situations, which if the press was functioning properly, they probably shouldn't have had to face. But, equally, you wouldn't necessarily have expected him to give away 2 penalties while in his prime. And, there's a couple of situations where he's perhaps not been at his imperious best. But Neymar's been talking about him and maybe given us a reminder, hasn't he, that he is still quite good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think again it's hard to criticize Van Dijk as well, just like Fabinho, because that defense has been very much exposed at times by Liverpool's midfield, and when you have 5 or 6 attackers running towards you with no protection in midfield, then you are going to make mistakes. You are going to give penalties away, and you are going to, you know, uh, commit some errors, and I think that's normal. Even the best will make mistakes, and as I said, he hasn't really been helped by the fact that there's literally no midfield at Liverpool at the moment at times, especially in that Napoli game. So yeah, I think I wouldn't I wouldn't take too much of his current form or his errors, um, because at the end of the day, you have to look at the context, the wider context, and the reason why he is struggling is not necessarily because he's lost pace since his injury, or he's not the same player as he was. I still think he's the same player as he was. I mean, defenders can be at their prime for until they're 35, 36 even. If you look at the likes of Bonucci, Chiellini, Sergio Ramos, so I don't think he's quite close to um, his twilight years necessarily, but I do think it's just inevitable when you have no protection.
Yeah, and I mean, when the likes of Neymar are name checking you as one of the most intelligent defenders around, it's always a good sign. Whatever people think of Neymar and what he made of his potential, he's certainly still one of the best about, and he clearly doesn't like playing Virgil van Dijk. But I suppose he might not have to play Virgil van Dijk if the Champions League struggles continue. So I suppose the frustration for a lot of fans is that, like you say, Van Dijk should still be in his prime. He's among a core group of Liverpool players who should be in their prime, and yet there's talk of a kind of transition season. So I suppose that's going back to one of the comments we raised earlier about how Liverpool sort of wasted the last 3 months. Do you think that we do have to resign ourselves now to a transition season, or do you think that something great can still be made out of this campaign?
It's a tough one. I mean, there's always the January transfer window, and I think what I take solace in is that there is a World Cup in November until late December, which takes away a large chunk of the season, and it kind of also gives Jurgen Klopp another pre-season with the players who are not going to the World Cup, and that includes the likes of Luis Diaz and Mohamed Salah. So there's going to be some good players staying behind at Liverpool. Unfortunately, Virgil van Dijk won't be one of them. He may even face potentially Neymar at the World Cup against Brazil. But I do take solace in that because I do think that can create a new momentum for Liverpool. And then once the World Cup is over, there's also the January transfer window. And I feel like they will address some issues in the squad if they feel like they have to. Especially, like, obviously we'll see how Arthur gets on. But if he isn't necessarily the signing that Liverpool would have hoped, or if it's not working out, I wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool do make a move in the window. And I think that kind of gives me solace. I think Liverpool still have enough to qualify out of the Champions League group. Maybe now it won't be as first place, but second place. So you might get a tougher draw in the first round of the Champions League knockout stages. But if they can address the issues in the second preseason and potentially even dip into the transfer market, I still think there's plenty of optimism there. And I think some of the new arrivals as well, like Fabio Cavallo, we've already seen him do really well, and I think there's still a lot of excitement. I'm looking forward to seeing more of Stefan Bajcetic as well. I think given the midfield situation, why not throw him in there and see how he gets on? I mean, surely it can't be anything worse than what we've already seen. And I think there is still a lot of exciting things happening around Liverpool. And I think, we might not necessarily compete for the title, but I think in the knockouts, potentially the Champions League or maybe another League Cup, an FA Cup trophy, I think that can still happen. I don't think it necessarily will be just doom and gloom this season.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's plenty of reasons still to be optimistic. It's a huge game tomorrow night. It's taken on even more significance in the sense that, like you say, Liverpool need to get to this next pre-season, if you like, while still in the Champions League. And if they do, then anything could happen. Someone says, let's be real here, lads, we're not winning the Champions League. Well, certainly we're not on current form. That no one would disagree with that. But if Liverpool get through the groups, I mean, you shouldn't forget that it was the year they won it in 2019, where they barely scraped through their groups. And in fact, it was a famous Anfield night against Napoli on the very last day of the group stages, which set up that run to the final and ultimately that victory. So let's not write anything off just yet. Plenty still to be excited about, particularly if Liverpool can navigate their way through to November with that Champions League berth still intact. So huge game tomorrow. Keep watching our channel, Blood Red. Keep reading Liverpool.com for all of the updates on that, on everything else to come. The Chelsea game, of course, someone mentioned in the comments earlier. There's some doubt about whether that goes ahead, so we'll keep you up to date with everything we hear about that. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Thanks for joining in the chat box. It's been delightful to talk to you all as usual. We'll be back same time, same place. For now, thank you very much.